book. It's very similar to chapter 4 in the Gilovich book. So if you have the Gilovich book instead of the Aronson book, then you'll want to look at chapter 4. Most of this information is in chapter 4. So let's go ahead and get started. Maybe. There we go. How we think about the social world. Chapter 3, Social Cognition. There are two kinds of social cognition. There's automatic thinking and controlled thinking. Automatic thinking is quick. There's no conscious deliberation of thoughts, no perceptions or assumptions being made. It's just automatic. Controlled thinking, on the other hand, is effortful and deliberate, thinking about yourself and the environment. It's carefully selecting the right course of action. That's controlled thinking. So some people are more controlled thinkers. Some people are more automatic thinkers. People will often react correctly despite not consciously choosing to react in that manner. And this is the automatic thinking that we're talking about. This is done through schemas, mental templates used to make decisions. We create these schemas. What is it going to look like when I walk into Burger King? Is it going to be is it like a sit-down restaurant, or is it like a fast food restaurant? These are the schemas, and of course that's a very simple one. But we have schemas for just about everything. What's it going to look like when I walk into the doctor's office? Do I have to talk to somebody when I walk into the doctor's office? And the answer is yeah, you have to check in. Probably have to check in. That's what you're probably meant to do. And these are all schemas that we have. So you may have a schema for going to class. If I have to go to a face-to-face class, I will walk in the room. The instructor will be there. And I will sit where I normally sit. I sit in the back of the room and looking at the instructor. I'm not going to choose a chair that's faced the wrong direction. These are all schemas. Emotional reactions, going with your gut feelings. This is part of automatic thinking. Expertise, unconscious understanding that guides our answers. Of course, after you've been to one semester of classes, now you have expertise in the schema of face-to-face classes. Implicit knowledge and understanding that we are not aware of consciously. That would be if you're walking along the trail and you see something in the dust, and it looks squiggly. You might go, I've never seen this. I've never seen a snake, and I've never seen them moving. But that looks like that might be a snake's trail or something. Implicit knowledge. Also, automatic thinking, blind sight. The perception is that it's not recorded consciously. You understand that it's there. It's like your peripheral vision. You're seeing things moving and happening in your peripheral vision, but you may not be recording this information. This is known as blind sight. The fact that it didn't register in your conscious self. This is something that I've been noticing is happening more and more with people on their phones all the time. And people concentrating on their phones, they're missing things outside. I was taking my grandson home from a soccer game at night a couple of years ago, and the chemical plant that we were about to drive past exploded. It exploded, which was a bit of a surprise because we drive past that chemical plant every time we go home. I take him to his house, and he didn't even see it. But he acknowledged it, that was the weird part. And of course, it was probably the blind sight. What happened? There was a flash of light. Of course, I was looking down the road, and the chemical plant was down the road, so I saw the whole thing. I saw it with my vision. He saw it with his blind sight. He knew it happened. He looked up just as the flash occurred. And he saw it with his blind sight. Prosopagnosia is where people suffer from if they have a certain type of brain damage. They can't recognize faces. They may still have increased heart rates when confronted with a familiar face. There's a couple of celebrities that have prosopagnosia. One of them is Brad Pitt. Doesn't seem to be able to recognize people's faces, but he does know the people. He, he responds to his own increase of heart rate when he sees somebody he's supposed to know. So he knows he's supposed to know them, and he calls everybody Bud. Another celebrity that has prosopagnosia is Megan Fox. Megan Fox, she also has something else. Body dysmorphia, I think, is another problem that she has. But she tends not to be able to recognize people. Prosopagnosia. Intuition is another type of automatic thinking. It's recognizing someone you know in a younger face of the individual. This, of course, is something that has happened to me since I'm so old. And I went back for my 50th college reunion, and here I was recognizing people's faces, thinking that I recognized people's faces. Subliminal, of course, is reacting to a stimulus that is below our threshold of recognition. This is fairly common. They put subliminal messages sometimes in recordings at the mall. They put subliminal messages in advertisements that most people can't get, but some people can. And I'm not going to show you any examples of that, but I will show you examples of intuition. Who is that? Do we recognize this individual? Well, we probably didn't know him when he was that age, but we knew him when he was this age. It was John F. Kennedy, of course. How about these two hippies? Two hippies. Maybe we see them as Bill and Hillary. How about this guy? Nice teeth. That Y stands for Yale. That's George W. Bush. How about this guy? Anybody? It's Pope Francis. How about this guy? Does he look like Captain Jack Sparrow, perhaps? And that's it. Schemas are organized structures of knowledge built from experience. We build schemas from experience. We've been to Burger King before. We know what it's like to go inside. Maybe we've been to McDonald's, so we figure, well, we know what Burger King's like. Or I went into a new fast food restaurant the other day. It was a place called Culver's. Culver's is becoming more and more popular. It's out of Wisconsin. Anyway, so the more experience we have dealing with this, the more likely that we will be able to get things right. They tend to contain causal relations. They're formed from a theory about how the social world operates, and these are the schemas that we put together in our own minds. People with expertise on a topic have a well-developed schema about the topic, and that's, we're talking about psychology. I can teach psychology. I have an understanding of psychology. So if I went to a conference, I would be able to converse on the subject because of my expertise. People create scripts that represent schemas about events. If you've ever, I went to the Indianapolis 500 when I was young. So if I went back today, I would look at my schema for the Indianapolis 500, and I would look at my script for the Indianapolis 500, and I would probably be surprised that it would not be quite the same, because I haven't been to the Indianapolis 500 in over 50 years. So I'm sure things have changed to some extent. I just went home last week. I went back to Indiana, and I drove around Indianapolis. I haven't driven around Indianapolis probably for 40 or 50 years. It was really kind of interesting. I did recognize some things, but there were other things I didn't. When I was driving around Indianapolis 50 years ago, there weren't the interstates around the city like there are today. Gender schemas are cognitive structures for processing information according to maleness and femaleness. Use of gender schema reinforces social stereotypes about gender. Not everyone is gender schematic, and of course, this is one of the things that has become more prevalent in the past 5 or 10 years, is the fact that gender schematics may be looked at as stereotypes. Schemas can be applied rapidly and automatically when we encounter other people. This is very common. You guys have schemas for other individuals. The assumption is that all people that are like that are like that. And people have schemas for you. I imagine, being an indigenous person, anybody, or most people don't even have a clue. I was talking to a lady from Scranton, Pennsylvania yesterday, trying to get her to allow me to use her textbook. Actually, I wanted her to give me a textbook so that I could look at it. It was the Gilovich book. And I told her where I worked. She said that I worked at Dine College. And of course, I had to correct her. And that was kind of interesting. And then when I told her it was on the Navajo Nation, she was, well, she's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So what does she know about indigenous people? The answer is very, very little. So her schemas were fairly empty as far as indigenous people are concerned. Schemas can be applied rapidly and automatically when we encounter other people, and of course, a lot of times they're more stereotypical than real. Schemas can help us deal with new situations by giving us a basis for interpreting a new situation. And of course, I had been on Indian reservations up in Montana, so when I came to the Navajo Nation, I had an idea about what I would see. I was sorely mistaken, of course. You guys don't powwow. They powwow a lot up north. That's a huge difference. Their personalities tend to be a little bit different. They're Northern Plains. They were buffalo hunters, almost exclusively. So yeah, a lot different. My stereotypes, my schemas were accurate for up there, but they weren't really accurate for the Navajo Nation. But they can help us deal with new situations by giving us a basis for interpreting a new situation. And of course they did. It did. It helped me because I was used to, their Indian time is a lot slower than yours. Yeah, if they start a powwow, if they're supposed to start at 7, they'll probably start at 8. I mean, it's that interesting. Anyway, so you can read those. You can see how stereotypes don't always work. Schemas are a good way to organize our thoughts and give structure to our memories by filling in the blanks when trying to remember. Schemas can aid us in paying attention by adding organization to our thoughts, and that's the reason why we have schemas. We're trying to organize our thoughts. We're trying to put things in boxes. We're trying to understand the world, and this is one of the ways to do it. Now, you can imagine if we didn't have schemas, what would happen to us. One problem would be we would look at every situation as if we had no knowledge of what was going to happen next. And of course, you couldn't drive a car because you couldn't anticipate. Well, if this semi, and this happened to me while we were driving around Indianapolis. We're driving around Indianapolis. There's a lot of road work because of the infrastructure bill that Biden passed when he first became president. There's a lot of money out there, and the money's being spent on repairing the roads. So we're driving around Indianapolis, and I had a semi right beside me, and we were going around a curve. Going around a curve, and I saw that there was a lot of construction, and he was going to hit bumps. And I had the feeling that when that semi hit those bumps, that he was going to bounce over into my lane, or he's going to inch over toward me because he would hit the bumps. He wouldn't have that much control. He'd be kind of flying in the air. He's trying to go around a curve, and he would inch over into my lane. So I kind of scooted over a little bit. I was okay on the right. He was on my left. And when he went around the curve, he did. He just bounced right into my lane. He was probably 6 inches on the other side of the line. But because I anticipated what he was going to do, he didn't hit me, didn't sideswipe me. We didn't touch each other. But that was because I was trying to stay away from him. That's how schemas work. Schemas tell you what might potentially be happening in the future. It's and to say that schemas are stereotypes and they're bad isn't really accurate, because our brains need to organize things, and the way that our brains organize things is in schemas. And sometimes the schemas play out, and sometimes they don't. I was lucky this time that I anticipated that he might move over. That looked like kind of a dangerous situation. He was accelerating. I had a feeling that he might jump over into my lane, and he did. And luckily, not luckily, my schema told me to scoot over because this guy might be coming over. And he was driving fairly aggressively, so and he was going faster than me. So yeah, I knew that I needed to get over him. He just about clipped the guy in front of me, because the guy in front of me evidently, well, he wasn't. You got all this stuff to look at the same time, and he was still parked a little bit to the left of center in his lane, and he almost got his tail light clipped, but the guy was able to correct in time not to hit anybody. Missed me by a mile, because I anticipated what was happening. Anyway, those are schemas, and schemas are good. Accessibility, once a schema is activated, we see more information consistent with the schema. And of course, that's because, well, I'm telling you about one incident where I thought the guy might be coming over, but there were other incidents during the same driving. It was really kind of interesting because my passenger was my former student from Bangladesh, who is kind of bossy. And a lot of times he would tell me to do things, and I wouldn't do it because I knew that there was a possibility that something else might happen. Okay, anyway, so when we're looking for these incidences, I've been driving for, golly, how 60, no, yeah, about 60 years. I've been driving for about 60 years, and I've seen lots and lots of stuff. Never been clipped like that, but well, I've been in situations where I almost got clipped, so I was smart enough to get over. But I got over a couple more times that it didn't happen, and that's okay. I felt fine, being cautious. We process information more quickly because of accessibility. We remember it better. Schemas can be activated outside of conscious awareness, and actually I started moving over as soon as I saw the bumps in the road. As soon as I saw his bumps in the road, there were bumps on my side, but I was in a pickup truck, and I knew that I had more control over what my car did than he did because he was in an 18-wheeler. And of course, this is known as accessibility. Recent experiences will increase our accessibility to the schemas that deal with these experiences. This is known as priming. Something can become primed for three reasons. It's chronically accessible due to past experience, and cars moving over into your lane is not that uncommon. Accessible because it is related to a current goal. Not getting hit was my current goal. Temporarily accessible because of our recent experience. And I had been driving around Indianapolis for a while at that point. And I knew there was a lot of road work being done. A self-fulfilling prophecy is the case whereby people have an expectation about what another person is like, which influences how they act toward that person, which causes that person to behave consistently with the people's original expectation, making the expectations come true. Teachers will do this with their students, maintaining the stereotypes that minorities will struggle to the point of failure, girls will be good, and boys will misbehave. And of course, those are fairly common stereotypes that teachers maintain. Sometimes by experience, they'll have 50% of the boys are good and 50% of the boys are bad. But you may have 80% of the girls are good and only 20% of the girls are bad. So if you treat the girls one way, you can assume that the girls will be good, even though 20% of the girls will be bad. And of course, the reality is that it's a very small percentage of both males and females that are good or bad. But the assumption seems to be from teachers, and we have seen this in research, that the teachers will tell you, whether they're male or female teachers, that the girls are good and boys are bad. If somebody's going to misbehave, it's usually a boy. 1968, Rosenthal and Jacobson assigned special status to random students and told their teachers about the spatial status. At the end of the year, the spatial students had excelled because it created a warmer emotional climate for those students, giving them more personal attention, encouragement, and support. It gave them more challenging material. It gave them more and better feedback. It gave them more opportunities to respond in class, and gave them longer to respond. So if you know you've got a student that is exceptional, you're going to assume that that student will succeed. So you treat them differently than you will treat a student who you're not sure whether they will succeed or not. As a matter of fact, you treat them as if the other students aren't going to succeed at all. Now, personally, I recognize this. I remember when I first read the Rosenthal-Jacobson research, and being a teacher, having been a teacher for the last, when did I start teaching? 83 is the year I started teaching, the year after I got out of the service. How many years is that? That's 17, 30, 41 years. Being a teacher for 41 years, I knew that this was the way it was, so I tried to treat all my students as individuals who could potentially succeed. I try to, but the reality is that you can't do that, of course. And yeah, well, anyway, I try. So I think of all my students as exceptional. I try to anyway. Heuristics are rule of thumb strategies that enables an individual to make quick, efficient judgments about a situation. These are known as heuristics. We use heuristics to promote our own survival. Humans as a species have developed heuristics to ensure that survival takes place. Being right isn't nearly as important as being alive. And let me give you a quick example. I have my brother, my next younger brother, had a friend who was a Quaker. And of course, you guys don't have any clue about how Quakers think, but they tend to be absolutists. They whatever they think is the correct thing. And this guy was one of those people. And geez, I tangled with him on Facebook over and over again. No, no, no. He was always right. He was always right. And the reason he was always right was because anything he thought was correct. So one day he's driving on the road and he's going around a big long curve. They have these in Indiana. He's from Indiana. They have these big long curves. And so if you, anyway, he's in the curve and he's on the outside of the curve. And on the inside of the curve is a pickup truck with a bunch of teenage boys in it. And they were cheating. They were cheating over the line. And you can do that if there's nobody coming towards you. You can use the whole curve. But of course, in this case, they were meeting him head on. Now he could have moved over and he could have gotten off the road. He could have driven so that there wouldn't have been an accident. But he's the kind of person. He's the kind of person that if he thinks he's right, he'll take it to his death, and that's exactly what happened because they continued to cheat. He stayed right in the middle of the lane, and of course there was a head-on collision. Well, it wasn't quite head-on. It was headlight to headlight, but he was behind one headlight, and it killed him. Anyway. So he was right, but now he's no longer alive. So that's they they charged the other guy. They would have charged the other kid with. There were three kids in the car, in the truck, and the driver died, but so did Ben. Ben died. So you know, so the driver was wrong. Couldn't charge him with anything because he was no longer alive. And of course, Ben was right, but he's dead now. So sometimes it's better to be alive than right. One of the most common heuristics that we use is detecting typicalness when making a decision. This is known as representativeness heuristics. Representative heuristics are often applied even against overwhelming odds because we trust our instincts so frequently. And of course, we're looking at all these people and trying to figure out, well, look at their tan lines. So what do they do? Well, this guy's a water skier. You can see that's where his vest is. She's a mountain biker, and of course, mountain bikers have shorts that come down, spandex shorts that come down to their knees. He's a scuba diver, and they wear the scuba outfit that covers the upper part of their arm, but not the lower part of their arm. She's a rollerblader, and you can see this is where her knee pads are. And there's her rollerblades come up above her ankle, and there's her elbow pads. And he's a computer programmer, so he's pale all over, and she plays tennis. Anyway, you can tell from their tan lines what they do. Okay, representativeness heuristics. 70 engineers and 30 lawyers were interviewed, and here's a random sample from their interviews. He is a twice divorced man who spends most of his free time at a country club. He regrets following in his father's footsteps. He wishes he hadn't spent so much time in college on academics and instead spent more time socializing so he wouldn't be so quick to argue with people. Is he an engineer or is he a lawyer? Okay. 100 people, 70 are engineers, 30 are lawyers. Is this guy an engineer or a lawyer? Now, people reading this, because of representativeness heuristics, 80% said that the guy was a lawyer. And one of the reasons they said he was a lawyer was because he argued. And he was following in his father's footsteps into the law firm. So 80% of the people reading this, of course, there's no answer to this question. It may be that he's an engineer, but 80% of the people thought he was a lawyer. This is lovely Linda. Linda is a 31-year-old single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Is Linda a bank clerk or is she a college professor? And of course, that has no answer either. This is Timorous Thomasina, and you could think, well, she participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. She's really interested in discrimination and social justice. She was a philosophy major. She must be a college professor. How could she possibly be a bank teller? They never got to argue with anybody. Okay. Representativeness heuristics. Here's another one. Timorous Thomasina. Thomasina is very shy and withdrawn, invariably helpful, but with little interest in people or in the world of reality. A meek and a tidy soul, she has a need for order and structure and a passion for detail. Is she a librarian or is she a doctor? And most people would say she's a librarian. An example of a representative heuristic is the Barnum effect. The Barnum effect is a phenomenon that when a general nebulous description is given to an individual of themselves, they believe it strongly, despite the fact that it could be true of anyone. The way people accept the findings of a personality test is an example of the Barnum effect. Sure, as long as it's positive, I'll believe it. By golly, that sounds like me. Barnum effect. While people tend to be slow to deduce particular instances from a general truth, they're remarkably quick to infer general truth from a vivid instance. This is known as the availability heuristic. In the South, far more rapes were committed by white males than black males. But because the rape of white women by black males is so widely publicized, white women are more likely to fear a stranger who is black than one that is white. And here is an example from the 1988 political campaign. Maybe. There we
go. Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Okay. And as we well know, Dukakis lost that election to George H.W. Bush. Oops, let me get out of here. And could it have been that advertisement that turned people away from Dukakis? It's fairly negative about Dukakis, and as you saw, Willie Horton was huge. He was gigantic.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Repeatedly raping. Right. Anyway. Availability heuristics. Unfortunately, as humans, we tend to base our heuristics on what is in our memory rather than take time to analyze a situation. We assume that if something comes readily to mind, then it is commonplace, which is not always true. Because pictures of plane crashes are more likely to make the paper, people see airplane travel as more dangerous than automobile travel. However, statistics show that you are 26 times more likely to die in a car crash than you are in a plane crash. Unless, of course, you are a Russian general and have said something negative about Putin. Yesterday, Prigozhin, the guy that was head of the Wagner group, was in a plane crash and died. So that was predictable. Cultures will often influence the way that a person thinks. People in Western cultures tend to have an analytic thinking style, focusing on objects without considering the surrounding context. People in Eastern cultures, that's Eastern Asia, that's Asian cultures, use a holistic thinking style, focusing on the overall context of relation between objects. So, if you were a Western thinker, wait a minute, I've got no arrow. There we go. Okay, this is a Western thinker. He thinks, you say orange, he thinks of orange slices. And this is a Eastern thinker. When you say orange, he thinks of the whole orange, of everything. This is how analytic thinkers think, and this is how holistic thinkers think. They think in context. Controlled thinking is thinking that is conscious, intentional, voluntary, and effortful. There's a question as to how much of our behavior comes under the control of controlled thinking and how much is dictated by automatic thinking. Controlled thinking gives us the feeling of free will because we control our lives. The more people believe in free will, the more likely they will help others. The less people believe in free will, the more likely they will participate in immoral actions such as cheating. They feel that society controls them and they are only cheating society, not themselves. Counterfactual thinking refers to mentally simulating events to imagine alternative scenarios. The closer an outcome, the more likely an individual will participate in counterfactual thinking. Research shows that the closer an individual comes to winning, the more regret that they feel. The more significant the event, the more likely the individual will participate in counterfactual thinking. Playing over and over again in our minds the accidental death of someone close to us is very common. However, we tend to live with less regret over an incident that we did than things that we didn't do. Trying and failing seems less regrettable than never trying at all. And this is a poem from Alfred Lord Tennyson's from Alfred Lord Tennyson. It's a poem that was printed in 1850. It's called In Memoriam 27. I hold it true whate'er befall. I feel it when I sorrow most. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. In other words, it's better to be in love with somebody than never to have taken the plunge and tried to find somebody to love. The regret is stronger if you didn't talk to the person that you felt strong affections for. While winners are always happy, research has shown that the unhappiest person on a three-tiered winners podium is the second place finisher. The second place finisher thinks about how he didn't come in first. The third place finisher is happy because he didn't come in fourth and not win a medal. And of course, this is from the Olympics. There's the winner in the middle. That's a gold medal. Here's the second place finisher. Safe water for every child. Anyway, And that's the third place finisher. Who's got the smiles on their face? Number 1 and number 3. Number 2, no, not so much. Okay, number 1, number 2, and number 3. Who's got the most disappointed look on their face? It's this number 2. Number 3's, that's almost a smile. That's not too bad. She's got a big smile, though. Okay, once again, 1, 2, 3. Who's got the biggest smile? Oh, number 1 has the biggest smile, of course. Who has the second biggest smile? Number 3, of course. And number 2 has a very disappointed look on her face. And here we go. Well, everybody's got a smile here, but who's got the real smiles? Well, there's the real. These are real smiles. These are almost as big as these. That looks like a disc, doesn't it? Well, she's almost got a smile. She's got a real smile. But this number 2, One way to improve our thinking is to understand that we place way too much faith in our judgments. This is known as the overconfidence barrier. We would be better off if we used analysis in our decisions rather than trusting ourselves to be brilliant all the time. And she's going to be sitting there for a while because she just painted herself into a corner. Oh well. At least she's got room to sit down. And that's the end of the chapter. So I'll talk to you guys next week. We'll tackle chapter 4 next week.